Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Market Watch. We have witnessed an impressive price performance of the tea sector related companies in the Colombo Stock Exchange during this year. The Colombo Stock Exchange Plantation Sector Index has performed 64% year to date compared to the SPI 5.4% year to date. So I think this could be mainly due to the decline in the global tea production, which is mainly due to the loss of crops in major tea exporting economies like Kenya and Sri Lanka. So to discuss this about these developments and the price movements, and at least and also we have witnessed the Sri Lankan price of bulk tea prices currently stands at 601 per kilogram in October compared to 465 rupees per kilogram a year ago. And also Sri Lanka being among the top 5 tea exporters, and it contributes about 10% to the global tea trade. And this declining global tea production will result in an increase in tea prices, and also as per the expert commentaries, it is expected to decline in 2017 as well. So to understand all these dynamics and the challenges within the industry, such as increasing wage rates and the future outlook, we have invited a group managing director at Sunshine Holding PLC, Mr. Vish Govindasamy, and he is the former MD of Watavala Plantation PLC and currently the Deputy Vice Chairman of Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. We warmly welcome you to the show, Vish.
Thank you so much. Nice to be with you, and nice to be with you when the tea trade is doing well.
Nice. Vish, amidst these developments, what is your view on Sri Lankan tea industry, and can you give us a brief idea on the overall value chain, please?
Yeah, Sri Lankan tea industry is probably at its peak right now in terms, and I think you opened up by saying the tea prices have picked up in the last year and a half, and it's mainly due to the global shortage of tea, mainly triggered by the El Nino effect that is supposed to be there now and supposed to get worse, and also the global consumption that has increased. Okay. So with the shortage of crop, global consumption, that is what has caused all this increase. You explained about Sri Lanka and Kenya. So these are the two big economies that produce tea, that exports tea. The rest of the, or I should say Africa and Sri Lanka, the rest of the tea producing countries predominantly are consumers. And if you look at China, its consumption has pretty much just gone through the roof in the last 3 to 5 years, and especially the consumption of black tea. They are predominantly a green tea consumer, but it's very fashionable in China now to consume black tea. Okay. If you look at the tea exports of Sri Lanka to China in the last 3 years, it is just flying. So there is a phenomenon that's going on between China, black tea, and I'm sure Kenya's tea, black tea is also coming into China. If you look at the total global production, it has gone from 2010 from about 4 billion kilos to 5.6 billion kilos in 2016. There's a 30% increase, majority of the increase coming from China. All of it is consumed. So there is no shortage of, or left back teas. There is only Sri Lanka and China has produced less, which has created all this buzz in the price movement. Okay. In terms of answering your question on the value chain, I would say Sri Lanka is probably the fastest from the tea bush to the cup. Mm-hmm. People may disagree the cup part, but at least to the export we are the fastest. Okay. Because from the tea that's plucked today 3 weeks from today, it's in our auction system, and our auction system is very efficient. It gets to the exporter's hand literally within a week, and then it gets exported within 10 days. So you're talking about 45 days the tea leaves Sri Lanka. And if you're looking at the consumer, it is the freshest cup that they can get if it is pure Ceylon tea.
Amazing.
If it is blended with something else, I can't say the same thing, but if somebody is consuming pure Ceylon tea, it's the freshest cup of tea that you can have.
So we are from the quality side.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay. Also, which you mentioned earlier, the consumption side. So if you can talk more about how is the total current global position in terms of demand, like can you give us a more in-depth view on that, please?
So like I said, if you look at the total production has increased by 30% and there is no tea left behind, that means the demand is growing, and the biggest consumers are India, China and the Middle East, and some part of Russia. Russia is of course not consuming so much because of the sanctions, etc. They're consuming the same amount but not increasing, whereas these countries are just consuming more. So demand, in my opinion, as long as we don't outdo production like we used to do. Sri Lanka used to always outdo every year. 310, 320, I think we ended up close to 330 million kilos.
Okay.
And at that time you can see our prices were low. The last few years we have come really almost close to 300 or below 300 now. Amazing. So that is what is causing a demand for our tea.
Okay, okay. Also, which as you mentioned earlier, Kenya and Sri Lanka, largest exporters.
Yes.
How Sri Lanka is within this competition level? Can you give us an idea on this?
Sure. So there is a fundamental difference between the the teas. Kenya produces majority of what we call CTC. That's a type of manufacture. Okay. Sri Lanka produces majority of orthodox tea. Again, it's a terminology used for the type of manufacture. So while we compete in the export market, we are actually two distinct teas.
Okay.
So they don't produce the type of teas we produce, and we don't produce the type of tea they produce. We produce very less amount of CTC teas, and whatever the CTC teas that is produced in Sri Lanka is of very high quality.
Okay.
They produce almost 90% CTC tea. They are now getting into orthodox tea, but remember, our Sri Lankan tea is grown in 3 different elevations: low, medium and high. So our low grown teas, which is almost grown at sea level, has a very distinct character, flavor. The type of leaf is all different, and that is very, very unique to Sri Lanka. And that is consumed by the entire Middle Eastern, European range. And that is something that's not available in Kenya, or they have not started doing that type of manufacture.
Okay.
But in terms of efficiency and productivity, Kenya is far better. They produce the same amount of tea in some 80 odd factories, where we are producing the same amount of tea in about 400 factories.
Oh, that's a huge gap.
There's an interesting thought whether the 400 factories, because we produce less quantity in each factory, and because each factory is driven by the different climates that the factory is placed, whether there is unique character. It's arguable. In some places yes, and some places the inefficiency creeps in. So if you were to compare those two, that's where we are. The other difference is Kenyan tea gets to Europe a lot faster than ours, because it's closer to market than ours, but we get closer to Middle East a lot faster than they. So I would think the two big competition in exporting is Africa and Sri Lanka, because India and China, they consume 90% of their produce. So
I hope Sri Lanka can close those gaps in future and work towards it.
Yes. So in my opinion, we need to be better in terms of efficiency, in productivity, and continue to focus on quality.
Quality.
Yeah.
That's right. Also, Vish, what would be the key global trends developing, especially within the tea sector? I mean, people are getting more into health conscious patterns and all these developments. Anything we can relate to this, and what would be the landscape in another next 5 years? What would your thoughts on that?
So majority of the new trends are coming from the United States. If you take US, there the tea consumption is growing,
Okay.
but it's growing in the specialty tea. They consume high-end.
Okay.
When I say they would like to consume single estate, like the single malt, they would like single estate.
Okay.
They would like different types of teas in terms of leaf, size, quality, etc. They are not interested in buying tea bag per se. They are interested in buying, the quality aspects of tea. So that is growing, but unfortunately in that segment, we are competing with the herbal plants.
Oh, really?
So the herbals, where you call the peppermints and you name it, chamomiles and all that are creeping in there as well. So there is a competition in that.
Okay.
But if we focus on quality, if we focus on origin, there is some difference that we can make in the global market.
Okay. So I hope Sri Lanka is getting ready for those trends as well.
We are working on it, but not to the aggressiveness I would prefer.
Okay.
So I think we are still, primarily we feel we are a bulk tea producer.
Okay.
I think we need to lose that trend. We need, as tea producers, the tea industry needs to come together and think that we are a value creator.
Amazing.
That fundamental change needs to take place. So that, once that takes place, then, it will make a difference. And some of the examples are, if you take the Australian wine industry, how they took on the French, you see, or the Florida orange, how they took on the South American orange. So, there's good success stories that we can follow
Benchmark,
to make that big shift.
Amazing. Yes, Vish, and as you mentioned, within all these developments, what would be the key challenges for our stakeholders in the tea sector? I mean, we know there's a concern of increasing wage rates, all these issues. What would be the...
For me personally, the economic challenges are something the industry can overcome.
Okay.
For example, the growing wage. It is an economic challenge. Any business has cost increases to do with people, right? Okay, maybe this industry is a little steep because of the number of people employed. But those are things that the industry can overcome as long as there is no political interference. So that's where this industry needs to be let go from, political interference, interference by various, interested parties, where it is, the entire industry is now privatized. It should be allowed to run like any private business. Unfortunately, in the smallholder area, because the number of votes are there, there is continuous, freebies given, etc., to keep people happy, and therefore we are interfering with the economies of the world.
That's right.
So for me, those are the real challenges. The tea industry is now facing a huge challenge where, a common weedicide called glyphosate has been banned for the last year and a half or so.
Okay.
So, without weedicide, how do we get rid of the weed? And the reason for it being banned is politics.
Okay.
So we are fighting with somebody that we can't win over. So those are the challenges for Sri Lankan tea industry. Otherwise, I don't see any huge challenge that as a business, the people can overcome.
Okay.
I mean, we are sitting on fantastic logistics.
Yes.
Nobody has this type of logistics like we have. Like I told you, the tea leaves the country like that. So we are blessed, but
Exactly,
then we seem to be screwing it up on these issues.
hope we get the strength to overcome those challenges.
I hope so. I hope so. And we are all working. And there's, even the regulator is trying very hard. The tea board is working really hard to make sure there is less interference and some of these pinpricks are taken away so that we do better.
Finally, Vish, we would like to know what your vision, and you said a fundamental change earlier. I'm really curious about that. What would be your vision for the future of this industry to take this forward? Final note.
Final note, I can speak for my company first. When we went into plantations, we did not want to be a bulk tea producer. So we made that big switch from being a bulk producer to be a branded player. We successfully launched 3 very good brands in the Sri Lankan market. We are the #1 player. So, from a plantation person to a branded player.
Okay.
I think everyone can do it. There is enough room for everybody to come out and be that. Not necessarily, it doesn't have to be creating brands here, but you can create brands globally. So Sri Lanka needs to, our competition is not in Sri Lanka. Our competition is global. So the tea industry folks need to think beyond Sri Lanka. We keep competing with each other here. Our competition is not here. We are too small.
Yes.
We need to think beyond the shores of Sri Lanka. So we need to reach out. I think again, there's more liberalization coming. Maybe some of us need to get together and buy a big brand out there in the world.
That's right.
And maybe that's what will liberate us from being, a bulk producer and being a big branded producer.
Amazing. Competition beyond borders. We'll focus.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Vish. It was very informative, and we hope to see you soon in another episode to have another exciting discussion like this.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. And for our viewers, we hope to see you soon with another exciting episode. Until then, take care.